Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Juan Daccach. He's an MD and VP of Global Product Safety at Merz Aesthetics. And he discusses the role of medical product safety and its interaction between safety physicians and medical affairs physicians for both pharma and device. So really interesting conversation. This is something that we haven't really talked about on this show before. So I hope you guys love it. Please share it with others. And as always, thank you for your support of this podcast. Hey guys, welcome to the MSL Talk podcast, a show specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. If you get value from these episodes, please click the subscribe button and share this with others. Tell all your friends. Thank you for all your support. Hey Juan, good morning. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hey, Tom, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. So this is like a really unique topic that we've never covered before. So I'm excited to get it out there to our listeners and to the medical affairs community and the device community. And we have the whole career transition story that we're going to discuss. But before we get into it, why don't you do an introduction and tell everybody a little bit about your background?
Sure. Well, my name is Juan Daccach. I'm originally from Colombia in South America. I'm an MD and I did orthopedics and then I did joint reconstruction. And I did 4 years of fellowship in joint reconstruction. And wherever that took me, that was where I was going to go. And then there was a slight change of plans, and I got approached by a big company that wanted me to join their medical affairs program. So I did, not understanding really what that was going to be about. And I took that chance, took that risk. And I said, well, I'm going to last a couple of years there and then I'll go back to my practice, or at least to start my practice. Well, that didn't happen. I stayed with medical affairs with that company for 4 years. And then I transitioned to the newly open space called medical safety. And I lasted in medical safety for 6 years, overseeing all the joint reconstruction business for this company and a part of their robotics business that was entering the medical device space for joint reconstruction. And then after 10 years with this company, the company that I currently work with needed somebody to lead their product/medical safety team. And, they took a chance on me and I accepted that job. And I've been working for this company for 2 years now, leading their safety team for medical devices.
Well, we're going to get into it. I do need to recognize that this episode is sponsored by MSL Mastery, which is a program that is designed to help with skill development for MSLs and aspiring MSLs. So if you're interested in some of the programs, such as we have a program called Aspire MSL, which is for folks that are looking to break into industry. It's a complete online course. We also have programs for presentation skills, and it's definitely worth checking out. Go to mslmastery.com for more details. But let's jump into this discussion about medical and product safety. And I think we're going to kind of define it that way because we're going to look at this from a couple of different angles as it relates to both device and pharma and biotech and its effect on medical affairs. So let's start with that question. So how does medical or product safety affect the biotech and device industry, and how does it fit into medical affairs? Can you just give us an overview of that piece?
Sure. So it's the relationship between your team that leads safety, wherever that fits in your company, and medical affairs is crucial. It has to be a two-way communication road, because for a product safety perspective, we need to have eyes on what's happening in the field. And what better team to help us with that, apart from all the data that we get from literature, registries, complaints, than our eyes on the field from a medical perspective, which are our MSLs. Curiously enough, I sometimes think that the S in MSL stands for safety, and it's science, right? I kind of like to call them MSSLs, medical science safety liaisons, because if you have that compenetrative relationship, we're all together doing what's best for our patients and what's best for our company. and being completely compliant with knowing everything that's happening with our products out in the field so we can measure the safety and efficacy of our product behind the scene. And that's what we do from a product safety perspective. One of the things.
Well, can just for people that are listening to this that maybe are looking to break into industry that aren't all that familiar, can you just give a quick definition of what medical safety is? Medical and product safety. What is it?
Yeah, so curiously enough, I was just in a 2-day mentoring weekend for physicians that would like to transition into industry. And that question came about very much so, because I think the top of mind when a physician is trying to break into industry is medical affairs, because they see the name medical and they kind of understand, mouth to mouth, that medical affairs could be their port of entry. But medical safety or product safety, what we do is, at least in the device world, and I'm sure that the pharma world as well does this, is you have specialized subject matter experts in the culture of safety and within medical background, looking at every aspect of the product life cycle, from idea generation to the research and development portion of the device or the drug, the verification, the validation, the testing, the risk assessment, the risk management, all the way through assessing of the clinical trials and this pre-launch phase, and then helping regulatory submit the package to whatever regulatory agency you're going to go to, and then answering questions from a medical perspective, because regulatory bodies will come back with medical questions. And then once you get the green light and launch, it's not an ending point for medical safety there. This is where we go into the post-market surveillance world. And sometimes some companies have a different team do that altogether, but usually in devices, and ideally, you have the same team that has been working on the pre-launch phase in the post-market surveillance world of it, to make sure that the safety and efficacy of our product in the field, in the hands of the users, is still safe and effective. So all that information that happens in post-market surveillance world, inclusive of what's out there in the field from the knowledge of our MSLs, has to come back in to fulfill that life cycle loop. And the best way to see that, as I mentioned, kind of in a linear fashion, is the post-market surveillance world coming back to our risk assessment and closing that loop. So it makes it a living life cycle.
Yeah. Well, then that makes me think, what would be the differences between how safety relates to pharma versus device? Like, are there differences in how that works?
I think every company defines their roles differently, but I believe that in the pharma world, you have dedicated people in the different phases of the development. And sometimes, at least to my knowledge, because I do have to disclose that I've never worked with pharma before, they have a separate team that looks at it from a post-market surveillance. For devices, usually you have the same safety team looking at the full life cycle of it. And in that life cycle, inclusive of post-launch activities, that is where we relate with our medical affairs colleagues, because they're part of the development, because they're bringing back their ideas to the development stages. They're bringing back all the key issues of what a medical science liaison is doing with the relationship with the KOLs, the data dissemination, whatever scientific exchange venues they get to go to, they're listening to that. So we need that in the initial phases of development to better understand where we want to navigate into this new product development. And obviously, being out there in the field, they're going to start listening to ideas from physicians or users of the product that could be incorporated into the research and development world. So once again, it's very important that the relationship between the medical affairs team, inclusive of the MSLs, is pristine and two-way road of communication with safety and R&D.
Yeah. And I know from my experience, I do have experience on the pharma side. There's a whole department within, for those that aren't familiar, within pharma and biotech companies called pharmacovigilance, safety and pharmacovigilance. And that would be the department that's responsible for this function. And there's a title called a medical monitor, which plays a pivotal role in clinical trials and the life cycle of a drug in its development, because that medical monitor is like what they call a watchdog. They want to make sure that they are on the lookout for any safety concerns, adverse events, and what might be an issue or a problem for the patient. So and that's a very rudimentary explanation of what I know and what my experience has been. So I'm adding that because I know your background is really more on the device side, and you're an
That's
MD, so
very,
you've
that's
seen
very,
everything.
yeah, that's very important, Tom, because I think historically, the sector that paved the way has been pharma,
Mhm.
right? Um, and you mentioned a key word, which is pharmacovigilance, right?
Mhm.
Comes from pharma, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of people, at least when I was in med school, I became an orthopedic surgeon. Again, I would have never thought that I would end up where I am today. I used to see like internists, or what I like to call the real thinking doctors, move into the pharma space. And it was always very curious to me on how was that going to work. And it's exactly what you were saying, right? The pharmacovigilance, the medical expertise in the drug they're developing. When that transitioned over to devices, a lot of the processes came with it. But devices are not drugs.
Mhm.
And regulations had to change in order to, first of all, say it's not the same. You can adapt kind of the general overview of the pharmacovigilance, but you need med dev, medical device regulations specific for a device. And if you think about it, one of the bigger differences between a device and a drug is the device itself. You have in your hand a product that will technically either be implanted or will deliver some sort of thing like energy, like an ultrasound machine, or I don't
Mhm.
know, some sort of laser, or you have an injectable device that either will remain in the body or will dissolve with time. So devices has a clear component of usability and human factors. And that makes it different because there's a whole different vigilance perspective to it, because now you just not only focus on the product itself, but on the tool or the instrument that is aiding you in delivering that device. And that
Mhm.
brings in a whole myriad of safety concerns on the use of the product. So,
Mhm.
yes, we are involved in clinical studies. We still have medical monitors. We have product safety officers. We have also people outside of there measuring the adverse events from a usability perspective. So when you
Right.
get an adverse event from a drug, for example, you just focus on the drug, right? Let's say
Mhm.
you're developing a drug and you get headache, heart attack, I don't know, whatever you want to list, and then you have your medical monitor look into that data and be that vigilante pharmacovigilance, right? In devices, we have to splice that a little bit different because we have to determine if it's coming from the device, is it product related, or is it procedure related? So it opens
Mm.
up a whole different aspect of the usability of the product versus just the product itself.
Yeah. Seems like there's a lot of complexities involved. And I mean, there's complexity involved on both sides, but it seems like it's a little tricky on the device side. So let's talk about the MSL and what maybe MSLs need to know about this safety piece that can make them more effective for both KOL engagement and for patient care.
Yeah. So first of all, is knowing the rules of engagement of your own organization, right?
Mhm.
So if you're in the field, and that's what MSLs usually are they're in the field, right? And you encounter some sort of complaint, adverse event, issue that you're seeing, something that's trending that you're hearing about. Maybe you go to a conference, maybe you come up with an article, maybe you're in an advisory board meeting that is coming up with these issues in the field, is knowing exactly how to bring that information in to the safety aspect of your company, and that's usually your safety team. Now, Some companies have one medical person doing the full span of both the field role and the safety role. But it's very important for MSLs to understand what is the conduit of bringing that information into the team that's conducting the signal detection and the trending. Now, there are some rules of engagement, like some companies that say every employee has a certain amount of time to inform whatever they find to or through the channels of input. It's usually 24 hours, at least in the two companies that I've worked with. It's 24 hours or less, which you have to fill a form, or there's an email specifically that you need to send your complaint or your finding, and then that would be captured by the right team, and it would be moved into the analysis of a potential trend or signal. So that's why I think it's important for MSLs to be open to listening and knowingly pursue the avenues of introduction of that information. So at the end of the day, as a company, we can make sure that we have full eyes on what's happening with our product in the field.
Yeah. And so in your experience then, what do you see as the key challenges that medical affairs professionals face when communicating the safety information to HCPs, to healthcare providers?
Yeah, so once again, the MSLs need to know what can they say or what they cannot say, right? And when I was in medical affairs, that was the hardest thing for me to learn from a transitioning point of being in scrubs all day, speaking with fellow orthopedic surgeons with basically no filter, right? And saying, I did this, I did that, this happened. When you engage yourself as part of a company, you have to understand the way that you are legally and compliantly able to have those conversations. And every company has their own rules of engagement in that aspect. So for somebody in the field, it's very important to listen. It's very important to know the product. It's very important to understand how to answer to questions from physicians regarding what's on the label and what's not on the label. And if there's any additional request for information, a lot of companies have precisely a pathway called medical request for information, which is a full different channel in which you put that request in, and then a group of people within the company that can be inclusive of safety provides that formalized, validated, and kind of copyrighted answer back to the user. And that has to go down the routes of legal, medical affairs, regulatory. So we're actually abiding by compliance in providing an answer. So that is one of the main things that are key for MSLs to understand as well when having those conversations. Because if you're an MD and you're out in the field having a conversation with MDs, you might get kind of forgetting the fact that you're representing a company, and you may have, and I'm talking about just full-on experience, you may just start having those scrubs hallway of hospital conversations, which are now different now that you're representing a company.
Interesting. That kind of makes me think, and I don't know how much this differs between device and pharma, but like, can you provide some examples of how MSLs might proactively engage with their KOLs regarding the emerging safety data for a product, things that they may need to know?
Sure. So it's a two-way road, right? Let's start with the road in which safety team or the quality team, which usually work hand in hand, find a signal in one of our products, right? We do our research, we do our investigation, we do the escalation, which is a defined process in which we determine if there is a product issue assessment and if there needs to be a health hazard evaluation. And usually when you see that signal of your product, you bring it in, you have the experts look at it as a PIA, a product issue assessment, and then you have to determine basically two things. Is there a safety risk for patients, or is there a regulatory risk, right? And once you have done that internally, you need to move into the action phase. What are we going to do if we have scored in a certain way that we need to inform? how is that information going to be? So that is usually what is called the field action. A lot of people mistakenly think that field action is completely and immediately related to a recall of the product, and not necessarily, because you can inform users about something that you have found that they need to be aware. Now, that information and how that information is disseminated from the safety side of things onto the field, this is where you have like a legal communication, but then your MSLs and your medical affairs team are going to be crucial and pivotal in communicating that from a medical perspective. So in that process of escalation, your medical affairs team should be part of it, because if that ends up in a field action or a communication, well, I'll bet you a nickel that the MDs or the users of the product are going to have a lot of questions. So who best to answer those questions than our MSLs, right? So it's how you incorporate medical affairs and MSL in everything that we're doing. Now, we flip it. Let's say from the medical field aspect, the MSLs start listening to things that are, rumored or happening. Well, they need to bring that information. They need to do that investigation. And as we talked before, drive them through the conduit so it can get to the safety section, quality section, so we can trigger that escalation and determine if there's really an issue or if there is not. I don't know if that kind of makes sense from the bidirectional type of perspective.
Yeah, totally. And it's amazing how much nuance is involved. I don't know if that's the right word, but there's a lot involved in this. And for those who are listening to this and maybe are looking to transition into industry, it just goes to show you how much goes on behind the scenes for MSLs to prepare them or to assist them in doing their job. We're talking about safety pharmacovigilance. There's a whole medical legal review piece. There's medical information. There's medical strategy. There's all of these pieces that have to all come together in order for the MSL to be fully supported in doing their job. This is just one piece, and it's one piece that doesn't get talked about often. That's why I wanted to have you on, Juan, because I've never had a conversation on this podcast before about product safety or device safety as it relates to the MSL. So just to get back into and kind of pick up where we left off, if in a situation where, let's just say, a device safety concern arises, what steps should MSLs take to, because you had mentioned that they have to bring the information back. So how do they ensure consistent and transparent communication with stakeholders, whether it's internal or external?
Yeah, so the first thing is really trying to understand what the issue is. And whatever that issue is, be very knowledgeable of the procedure on how that information has to be brought in. And again, I would assume, because even though I work for medical affairs, I have never been a medical science liaison, right? But I am very fortunate to be working with people, or have been working with people that have been on the field and that are now in kind of in a global perspective. And they have been teaching me a little bit about the exact question you said, right? So when they have this concern, they have to bring it in. That's basically it, Tom. And really, what you were mentioning about behind the scenes, that's what needs to happen. And if it's something critical and your risk assessment leads you to think that it's of high severity of the harm that potentially is causing, or the malfunction of the device, right? Then that needs to be expedited by, immediate escalation process. And every company has that, because when we're audited, that's one of the biggest things that is being asked about is, if you have an issue on the field, what do you do? And if a company doesn't have that clear cut, concise, and precise, then we're going to get, a little warning, or we're going to get a slap in the hand by the regulators, or we're going to get a 483, right? Because that process is how we ensure that the safety of our product in the field is kept safe and kept efficient. So really, what we do, at least from our team, we have continuously trained the people that we think could be our help, or our eyes, or our vigilance in the field. Our team recently conducted a refresher training to our medical affairs partners. And again, I do want to disclose that sometimes in some companies, you feel that safety is competing with affairs, and it's not the case. We need to complement each other, because at the end of the day, it's our product, our patients, right? And it's the safety of everybody. So having that two-way communication, having that clarity of driving the information through the right channels is the key. So if you're an MSL right now and you're working for a pharma company or you're working for a device company, make sure you understand those procedures. And when you join a company, Tom, and I think you may have lived it, and I'm sure you talk about it in your other podcast, you get blasted with 150, 200 procedures that you need to learn in a month. Right? You read them. You sometimes fast forward on them. It is the practice that makes the perfect, right? Or it's the practice that makes the purpose. Like I like to quote Deion Sanders on that one, right? It's how you evolve in what you do currently that is going to allow you to understand, by having the notion of the procedure, where can I become proactive, right? So MSLs usually are thinking, all right, what is the information that I can see here? What are the gaps that need to be filled? What are the publishing that I could do? What are the clinical kind of phase 4 type studies that I can work with to create more information? As they're doing that, they may be listening to, well, your product did not work for me here, or your device malfunctioned there. So every time they hear something that is not in their line of positivity, because yes, unfortunately in safety, we're gathered more with the complaint side of things, they need to bring it in. And we will bring them back kind of the result of what the investigation tells us. Because again, in the backstage of things, Tom, and when I used to be implanting hips and knees, you're handed a product and you implant the product. But that product that they hand you, that may be the norm of your day-to-day, implanting 3, 4 a day, has so much behind it. It's crazy. It's crazy how many years and years it takes to develop a product. And you as a physician just see it for a little bit of time. You use instruments to put it in, or you use a device to deliver the energy, but it has so much behind it that we need that feed from the field to make sure that it is safe and effective.
Amazing. I'll tell you, there's so much to this. Way more than I really expected. But hey, man, this was an awesome conversation. I hope people got a lot out of it. I know that I did. I learned a lot. I didn't realize the complexities and how much is involved on the safety side. So last question, what do you see as, what's the future look like? Are there any trends that relate to this safety piece and how it might affect MSLs and medical affairs?
Yeah, so from a safety piece in the device world, and again, recently I've been, as I told you before, traveling to all these meetings to better understand where the future is. And this is my second year going to these meetings. And obviously AI and machine learning and software as medical device, and all of this it's coming to fruition. Also AI in understanding the data better, right? AI to better enhance a device. So that is the key trend that this year has two kind of things that have evolved. One, the AI and machine learning understanding per se, and where will it fit? And two, the regulation behind it. Now, there's another thing that's very important for people to understand is that pharma companies may be looking at devices to deliver their drug. Example, you're working at a pharma company that is developing an oncological drug for a specific cancer that happens in a specific organ of your body, right? Now, they acquire or partner a device company that will endoscopically or, in any other way with a device, deliver that drug specifically to that area where it needs to be kind of, used in the body. So that is called a combination. And that now is in the realm of the regulatory world called a combination product. And that is regulated as a combination product. So that is coming to fruition in a sense of pharma and device and that is still being developed to understand and better understand how to regulate a combination product. And when you do your risk assessment, it's not just let's take this route or this route. You need to take a combined route. So that's one thing that I would encourage people to look into, apart from the everlasting and bombarding of AI, machine learning, robotics, and all the pharma advancements that are out there.
Things are moving fast, that's for
Very.
sure. And this is the piece of this equation, of a huge equation that I haven't covered yet. So thank you for doing that for me. Thank you for coming on and for sharing your knowledge. And as always, thank you guys for listening. Appreciate you. Thanks for sharing this show and for all of your support. You guys are the best. And we'll see you next time. Juan, thanks again.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you to all listening in.